Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and of course, the subject this week is talking about the economics for a player in the National Football League. And nobody to talk to better than Leigh Steinberg, who's been top agent for so many years, almost 4 decades, trying to talk to the top quarterbacks, talk to what's going on, and what a change. And I remember, first kind of starting with the, covering the league in the 70s and that was right at the time agents started to become prominent. Leigh Steinberg was just starting out. He was representing Warren Moon and others. I know Marvin Demoff was just kind of starting out. And it was kind of a time that everybody was kind of feeling their way. And because of the creativities of guys like Leigh Steinberg, Marvin Demoff, and others, it's certainly changed the balance. Because in the old days, and of course it took some labor battles to be able to fix this up, the owners had total control. I mean, if you went in for a raise and they said no, well, guess what? You didn't get a raise. That was just the simple economics of it. I still remember the old stories about Vince Lombardi, guys coming in and say, hey, I had a great season and I deserve more money. And he goes, yeah, you're not getting it. So sorry, that's not going to happen. Then, of course, you go back and there was some history made here in Seattle. I know Marvin Demoff did the Rick Meyer contract. And of course, there was Drew Bledsoe and all that. And what ended up happening is that they were able to get around the agents like Steinberg and Marvin Demoff, the rookie pool, which of course, you remember back in the old days, there was a rookie pool, but everybody exceeded it. And part of it was the creativity of guys like Steinberg and Marvin Demoff, because what they were able to do is put clauses in there and options and stuff like that to a point where what was supposed to be, a contract that would be $3 to $4 million ended up being $12, $13 to $14 million a year. I mean, you go back and look at Sam Bradford, and when that was the last big year of those contracts in 2010, I mean, I think he got $78 million over 6 years, $13 million a year. Well, that doesn't happen now. Times changed, and of course, a couple collective bargaining agreements, gave the owners a little bit more clout in trying to hold down salaries. But in the end, it's still hard to do it because, for example, one of the things that was wise the Players Association did in 2011, they tied the franchise numbers to the increase in the salary cap. So, for example, with the salary cap going up $10, $12, $13 million a year, that all of a sudden takes the increase of every position on the franchise number up $1 million to $2 million a year. An example, you got Kirk Cousins got the franchise tag. He got $19.9 million. Now, if he, again, gets another franchise tag, that'll be $23.9 million he's going to make. And eventually you're going to see the franchise numbers for quarterbacks within a year or so go up to $25 million. That's just the economics. But then what that has done is created a have and have not type of system. And I was going through some numbers the other day, and I think you look at about 188 street free agents. Guys that, are on the street. We're not talking about unrestricted free agencies, the guys like Olivier Vernon who got $17 million or Brock Osweiler who got $18 million. We're talking about the guys who were cut or didn't have jobs. Okay, and so some of those guys got money. Like, for example, Mario Williams, defensive end of the Miami Dolphins, got a 2-year contract at $17 million, and that's $8.5 a year. Didn't work out. He's going to get cut because he just was pretty much at the end of his career, not really playing that well. But, I counted up maybe only 3 dozen players who got anywhere over $1 million, something other than the minimum salaries. And you may get a little bit of a signing bonus, but that's kind of telling you there's no middle class. And that's why when you look at teams, I mean, a lot of people were kind of wondering, gee, what's going on with Seattle? Start the season with 14 rookies. Well, to work around the salary cap and work around the fact that this team has about 9 or 10 players making $6 million a year or more, what you have to do is stay young at certain positions. And don't think, okay, they're trying to be cheap on the offensive line. If they felt that there was some offensive linemen on this team that they drafted or had signed that they could get contract extensions, they would have done it. They didn't do it with J.R. Sweezy because, he ends up getting $6.5 million, and where they think they wanted to pay him $4, they realized Russell Okung, who was making $8 million a year, was not going to take $8 million. He was hoping for some contract that eventually would pay him $12 million, and he had to take a 1-year deal at $5 million to be able to collect something like that. But in the end, what happens is there's no middle class. And so with a a quarterback like Russell Wilson making $21.9 million a year, what you have to kind of do is, cut the middle class. So a lot of those guys who were going to be developmental running backs were rookies. A lot of the guys that were guys that trying to get the offensive line, they're rookies. And so you try to do the best you can because you can't pay everybody. It's a cap that you cannot go over. And if you overextend, well, it just simply is not going to happen. And then you have to leave so much money available for injury. I mean, that's a big thing because, you look at most teams' injuries list. They got 12, 15, 20, 22 players on the injury list. That eats up $10, $15 million, if not more, of the salary cap. So in the end, you just have to be cautious and try to do it. Yeah, so really, with no middle class, you have to try to find ways to develop players, and that's what Seattle did. You look at the Denver Broncos. Now, they didn't work out this season for them going to the playoffs, but they had a lot of young players. Green Bay has 7 undrafted free agents that they kept on the team. You have to have low labor costs in some ends. But it is kind of interesting to see that middle class, and it's going to be tough because, you got a lot of guys in their second and third contracts looking for big money, and they're simply not going to get it. So it's one of the things that there's a lot of cap room, there's a lot of money, but it's not enough to really justify, going into that middle class. So you have the haves, the have-nots, and you have a lot of interesting negotiations. And, salary cap, as you know, I study and follow a lot. Economics in the NFL, I study a lot. But I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. We'll get you educated with Leigh Steinberg. Leigh Steinberg's been doing it now for such a long time. Interesting perspectives on where this labor situation is, what it is to get quarterbacks in this league, what it is to be able to get teams managing all through this. We'll continue along here with Schooled with the Professor with Leigh Steinberg. We are pleased to be joined by Leigh Steinberg, Agent Supreme for so many years, and he's seen this business change so many times through these years. Change in the standpoint that, players had clout a lot of times in negotiations, and as time goes on, it becomes tougher. Obviously, players make a lot of money, but Leigh, how different is it now than when we started to get together and compare notes in the late 70s?
I think if Rip Van Winkle had gone to sleep in the 70s and awakened yesterday, he would be in total shock. If you recall, teams had valuations in the mid-70s with Tampa and Seattle coming into the league of $16.5 million. And today you have the Dallas Cowboys valued at $4.3 billion. Teams were making $2 million as their yearly share of the national television contract, and last summer they cashed a check for $226 million. We have new stadiums. We have, with jumbo scoreboards and naming rights, we have fantasy football, which is developed with 45 million people playing it. We have the whole birth of the Internet with social media and instantaneous news. And we have a generation of players brought up in a time where they have the illusion they can control every second of sensory perception through their thumb. So they're tweeting and YouTubing and Facebooking and LinkedIn and multitasking every day. So patience and attention span has gone down. Still, I'm able to find role models who have decent, good values, and we still do the charitable and community programs, but everything else has changed. And in the NFL, we now have a rookie salary cap, which has very little elasticity and now makes players wait 4 years until they can come into the largest part of the revenue stream, which is for veterans.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think even the players don't recognize, that the way this system works now, getting to that second contract is not as easy financially as you would think, because there's so many casualties down the line that you get cut, you get injured, things happen, all those things. And usually now the way free agency works since 2011, and it'll be even less last year, you may have as few as like 90-some players that make it through their rookie contracts, have a chance to get a second contract either with their team or with another team in the league, and then a lot of them don't get much more than the minimum salary.
That is true, although you do have a very interesting trend. Last year, the top 16 players who were drafted in the first round all got skill and injury guarantees in the 4 years of their contract. That had never happened before. That was what distinguished pro football from baseball and basketball, in that the contracts were not guaranteed for salary. Those went on all the way down to Paxton Lynch, who was the 26th pick. He received 3 years fully guaranteed, and for the first time, 600 of his fourth year. And you had contracts in the second round that were skill and injury guaranteed for 2 years. So that's been a major breakthrough. Free agency has never operated in football the way it does in the other sports, because teams that have major superstars will preemptively sign them to new contracts, or in the outlier cases will use their franchise tag. So free agency operates to keep A-plus players on the teams that they've been on, and B-plus players get A-plus contracts, because that's the supply of talent.
And then the tough part is what's happened, because the salaries have gone up substantially for the A-plus players, is that the middle class just kind of evaporates. They don't get a real middle class.
You're so right. There really is not a middle class. And so what's happened is that because of the salary cap, if major stars are going to be paid an extraordinary amount of money, the only way a team can survive is to back those players up with rookies, veterans at the end of the contract, players that are way down the pay scale. So you have a two-class system, same income separation that people complain about in the larger society. And so it has all sorts of effects. Because of the salary cap, you no longer have a tutelage period for rookies where they sit behind a talented vet. They have to come in and play right away. It has a devastating effect on the quarterback position, because people, instead of giving them 3 years to develop, all of a sudden judge someone to be a bust quickly. Another effect it has is that when you have injury during the season and the A-grade tackle is hurt, he may be replaced by a C-rated backup tackle. And so injury has a more devastating effect, because you don't go to someone mildly less talented. You go to a rookie or someone who's very less talented, and it can have a huge impact on the playoff races.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, then the unfortunate thing, without a developmental league, I mean, you have a lot of players who are those C-plus players without experience getting a chance to go in there, yet, there's no chance to really catch up quickly to be able to play at the highest level.
So let me give you a great example. We now have gone to a system where a couple of years ago, I think 15 of the 32 teams, almost half, carried two quarterbacks. So now quarterback A gets injured, and quarterback B is the starter. Well, if they have someone on practice squad, that's great, but very often they're bringing in players who've been sitting at home, who've never been through training camp to play that most critical position. And once quarterback B is hurt, then we're on to a different level. So at the most critical position in pro football, teams that keep two are taking a major chance that someone with no training camp or other background in their system are going to be called in mid-year.
And, of course, I'm thinking at the beginning of the season, my count was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 quarterbacks who were technically the backup quarterbacks who had never started a game. First time.
Well, this is very true, and remember, we have bigger, stronger, faster defensive players who are going to get to the quarterback. And so even with the new protective rules, which don't the concussion protocol is supposed to be helpful, but we sit and watch from the very beginning of the season when Cam Newton gets hit about 3 times in the head and is only taken off the field once, that the attrition rate is heavy.
And that's the worry, because, again, there's not the replacements, there's not the developmental area to be able to do it. At what point do you think it gets to where the league starts to realize maybe there's a problem that needs to be addressed in this?
Well, there's always been a problem in that a player who is cut in pro football may get signed to a practice squad, but if he doesn't, there's no place for him to go. Arena football's not played the same way. The CFL is a different league. So they don't have what they have in baseball or basketball, which is games going on, players in service who are not on the major league roster, who may just be a little bit worse than the players who are on the roster and can be brought up. in an active way. And given the fact that it's become a quarterback-centric game where teams have very few options to win without a franchise quarterback, someone you can build around for 10 to 12 years who can elevate their level of play in critical situations, when that position gets damaged, it alters dramatically the whole sense of opportunity that someone has to make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I worry about, because I think that it's going under a certain rule, the NFL is, not realizing the change in college football. Because now in college football, you take the quarterbacks who are spread quarterbacks or air raid quarterbacks, they're coming out after 3 years, and their chances, even though, again, this is not their fault, their chances of succeeding early aren't that good.
No. Here's the problem at the quarterback position. No position needs more time on the field. The only way you get better is more time on the field. No position deals with an elevation from the college game where the players that are not the great cornerbacks and everyone are now eliminated, so the degree of separation between a wide receiver and a defensive back is much less. The offenses are so complex, the game moves faster, and now you're bringing in two-thirds of the college quarterbacks who have played an entirely different game. They haven't lined up over center. So last year we had Paxton Lynch. This year we've got Patrick Mahomes. You saw it with Jared Goff and Marcus Mariota. And so immediately this player comes out of college and they say, well, he's years away because he hadn't played in the offense. So he's not years away because any quarterback is going to be better with each successive year. But the public tolerance for slow and prudent development has gone way down. The amount of blogs and talk radio shows and television shows, all that analyze football, all of a sudden you're going to judge a Jared Goff on a couple games behind a really porous offensive line. Well, it used to be 3 years, and so if you look at it, a preeminent quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Carson Palmer, Phillip Rivers, they sat for 2 years and learned behind talented experts. You combine the fact that most players are playing in spread offenses, they're not even playing the same offense, and the fact they're not getting that period of tutelage, and you've got a real supply problem on the quarterback position.
Oh, yeah, and that's, I think, a big concern. And I think that, the league has to probably figure out, and coaches have to figure out, that, you almost go back to the 70s and start to think, okay, there's got to be an apprentice type of filling position there that is like, you can't automatically. I mean, Terry Bradshaw sat for some time, other quarterbacks sat for some time, and I have to think, we see Bryce Petty, guys like that, the teams need to have more patience.
Their patience has really dissolved in terms of that. And again, we judge these quarterbacks so quickly. I mean, they come out after 3 games, even if they have a prolific first starting year, like an RG3 or Colin Kaepernick, very often they fade back. Now, it has never made sense to me that we draft quarterbacks high, we pay them an extraordinary amount of money in signing bonus, and then short-circuit the developmental process. In other words, they should be paying the quarterback coach and should figure out a developmental process and explain it to the fans that it's just going to take time. Warren Moon once told me that in his first year in pro football, he was just running around throwing the ball to the open receiver. I mean, he couldn't really read defenses clearly in the NFL, and none of them can, but we expect them to.
Oh, I know, and that's the crazy part about that, and just the unrealistic expectations, particularly now. It's like, okay, the game's changed significantly in college, and it's like the league has not really changed the way it feels about quarterbacks. I sat across, from at least a couple general managers, and they said, hey, if that quarterback's not developed in 2 years, you got to move on. I look at, for example, Buffalo. They signed after 4 years in Baltimore as a backup, Tyrod Taylor. All right. Was he great? No. But Tyrod Taylor goes ahead, has a 15-14 record. His offense scores 24 points a game. They give him a kind of a bogus $18 million a year contract, and then now pretty well decided, nah, you're not that good. We're not going to even care about you anymore.
See, and they're not giving him enough time. And here's where it gets distorted. You have a quarterback like Dak Prescott who comes in and has massive success in his first year, or RG3 who had massive success in his first year. Well, Dak Prescott is an extraordinary young quarterback, but he also has a line that's the most impregnable unit, and probably ought to get the MVP as a collective group of players because they're so good. And he has Ezekiel Elliott with a running game. So when I had Ben Roethlisberger back in 2004, he came in and won his first 14 games and has gone on to be a Hall of Fame type quarterback. But he also had a terrific offensive line. He had a great running game. He had a wonderful defense that put him into really good field position. And they didn't ask him to do too much. So these first-year successes distort it because it creates the illusion that, well, you can come right in and you're going to be as good the first year as you will be the fifth. It's just not true.
No, that's true, and it's sad to see because, I mean, you see a lot of quarterbacks, and particularly now, if you're playing behind, if you have a great quarterback and a team drafts a quarterback, that quarterback, Ryan Nassib and others, they may sit for 4 years, never play a down, and you don't know what they are, and, now they get to the age of 27, 28, and there's no jobs for them.
The one thing which has made this better is the fact that now a quarterback like Paxton Lynch last year, instead of going to mini camp in his rookie season, going home and then walking flat into training camp where they're getting the starter ready to go and he gets very few reps, what happens now is that the player goes to mini camp and then he'll have a couple weeks of strength and conditioning, and then he may have as many as 6 weeks in OTAs where he's able to run the team's plays with team personnel under team supervision. And so he gets another 6 weeks of at least exposure before he ever goes to training camp. So you would expect that this group of rookies who've got the extra time could, at least have that extra advantage. But nothing replaces play on the field and understanding. The game slows down. And anybody who's tried the piano or ice skating or any other discipline needs a certain amount of hours to slow down when you first start to type on a typewriter or a computer. And then you think of what happens after you've done it for a few years. It creates in the brain systems that where it just all seems to slow down, and you can see what's in front of you and perform much better.
Hey, Leigh, it's always great catching up to you. Looking forward to seeing you down in Houston at the Super Bowl.
Thanks, John. We're doing this will be the 30th party that I've had at the Super Bowl. I believe you came to the first one back in 1985, and but you'll be stuck in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, because I started, 88 was my first year in the Hall of Fame, and at least back then, the meetings would end up early enough I could make it over for the latter part of the party. Now, the Hall of Fame vote outlasts the party.
Well, at least you've got your wife,
yes,
who represents you very well, who can come, but but we miss you, and we'll send a tape to you.
Okay, well, we'll catch up at the media center, so I'll see you over there.
Okay, good deal.
Good news, everyone! It's time
to ask the professor.
I'm the professor!
Welcome back to Schooled with the Professor. Remember, each week you get a chance to ask me any question relating to the podcast. Just go on Twitter, use the hashtag ClaytonSchooled. This week I talked to super agent and friend Leigh Steinberg about the ever-changing economics of the National Football League. One question comes from Christy in Tampa. And Christy, thank you so much. With the salary cap increasing each year, NFL owners making more and more money, will we see the bubble burst? And if so, when? Well, I don't know if the bubble's going to burst. I don't think it will. I mean, you look at the master plan of Roger Goodell, and what Roger Goodell ultimately wants to do is take the revenues to $25 billion. And the league is well along the way of being able to do that. The economics of it, I think I counted up $14.4 billion of cap room, or $1 billion of revenue to justify the salary cap for next year. And of course, that means the salary cap's going to go up to $168 to $170 million. And that's good for all involved. Number one, it's great for the owners. I mean, take a look at Jerry Jones. This past year, the Dallas Cowboys grossed about, $4.3 billion of revenue, took in maybe over $100 million of profit. All those things worked out great for them. And of course, you still have new stadiums that are coming in. Minnesota opened up with a new stadium. That's taken their revenue up over $100 million. Atlanta's going to open up with a new stadium next year. Within a couple years, you've got Los Angeles opening up with a massive stadium. And so that increases the revenue. So now the question is, when you're looking at the whole economics of the National Football League, can television sustain things? Now, you notice just this week, everybody's doing their studies on the impact of the elections and how much it cut down attendance, or not attendance, but again, ratings in the National Football League. And at one point, ratings were down 14 points, but this is before the election. Then after that, all of a sudden, good things started happening to the National Football League. The Dallas Cowboys become very popular again with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott and the number one seed. So they're drawing anywhere between 21 and 28 million fans viewing TV each week. So in the end, there was an 8% reduction in the TV ratings, and my guess would be next year you'll see it go back up. And if that's the case, that means the bubble's not going to break on the TV side. From the fan interest level, that's not going to be able to break. I mean, down the line, what you do worry about is the concussion issue, and if it's going to start drying up talent. That's a different subject because, I mean, you notice youth football now does not have as many people and not as many kids out there playing because parents aren't allowing them because they're worried about concussions and injuries, and that's something that's going to affect ultimately the game. But if they can try to find better ways to protect the players, both in the National Football League, in high schools, I mean, you've got many projects going on, then that's going to do it. But no, the bubble doesn't burst right now because, say what you want, interest in football continues to grow. Now, maybe you look at the ratings and say, oh, no, that's not the case. Well, take a look that what you're seeing is a changing of the viewership overall, because now you have more millennials, the people that are young and smart and creative and don't want to spend a lot of time looking at one thing. I mean, they're streaming. They're watching it on their iPads or watching it on their phones, or they're watching the Red Zone channel. I mean, that's viewership. People are watching. But the problem is, at the moment, it's hard to combine the streaming versus the people that are viewing and say, you talk about, okay, so now viewership is different. Viewership is down. Well, here's what the National Football League figures. It's the number one rated show by far of anything that's out there. Because now what you do is you put that on for 3 hours, particularly on a night game. There's nothing that can top that as far as the viewership for 3 hours. Sure, the viewership's changing. I mean, a lot of people are going a different way. They're getting out of cable. They're trying to watch things on TV a little bit more. They're trying to mix and match and do all those things. But still, the viewership both on the iPads, on the iPhones, and television continues to increase. Fantasy football continues to grow and allow the interest in football to go. So, no, I don't think the bubble's going to burst. I think it's going to continue. I mean, the league has to be cautious. They've got to make sure that the quality of the game stays there. And I think this year you saw many strains in that, and you've probably seen that over the course of the last couple years. But the league keeps being able to get good breaks. The Dallas Cowboys coming back and being prominent. The Green Bay Packers, still having a great brand. The Oakland Raiders, another big brand that came back and now started to win. You got a big brand in Seattle. You notice every time they get a primetime game, their ratings are very good. So overall, I think the state of the National Football League may have had a little bit of a difficult year. The election played into it. I mean, back in 2000, I believe, ratings were down about 6% because of the elections. And they figured out, when you have interesting elections or strange elections like we had for the presidency, it does affect ratings. Well, that's not going to happen now. You have to wait 4 more years for that to go. So in the meantime, things look good for the National Football League. The bubble is not ready to burst.
That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.